All right, thank you, Tom, and welcome everyone. As Tom mentioned, I'm Warren Frace. I'm the Community Development Director, so I'm in charge of the Planning Department, the Building Department, as well as the City Engineer Department. So let's see if this is going to work. There we go. All right. Off we go. All right, so with me tonight is Susan DeCarli. She's our city planner in the back. She might be here to answer any technical questions we have. Also, Darren Nash, our associate planner, is in the back to help out. And then David Athy, our city engineer, is available. So next slide. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about tonight is the general plan. Just some background information on that. We're not trying to get too technical. We're trying to give kind of a high-level, broad information on these topics. We're also going to talk about what specific plans are. There's a lot of questions about how we do those here in town. And then Dave's going to talk about the circulation element. And he's also going to talk about future traffic and circulation projections. So we want to do questions and answers, but we're going to hold those to the end because we're videotaping this and we want this a presentation that kind of holds together. We also have a contact list in the back, so if you have questions or want more information, you can be on the list for future information. You can also email questions to planning@prcity.com if there's something more technical that you want to talk about. So what is a general plan? So a general plan is required by the state of California. So all the cities and counties in the state have a general plan. The best way to think of a general plan is it's basically a set of principles and policies that the city council adopts, and that creates what's best thought of as a blueprint for the future of the city. So it's the vision of how we want to build and grow our community. It can be adjusted and changed over time, and it does adapt as things change, but it's good to think of it as kind of like a blueprint. Although the general plan is not a law, it's more of a policy, anything that the city does in terms of implementation, like zoning, capital improvements, like building roads, streets, issuing building permits, they all have to be consistent with the general plan. So there's this consistency rule. So the general plan is kind of at the top, and then everything we do in terms of physical construction and development within the city needs to be consistent with the general plan. So our general plan has 8 elements. There's the land use element, the open space element, conservation element, those are combined. We also have what's called a housing element, circulation element, which is what Dave's going to talk about, a safety element, and a noise element. And we're actually in the process of updating the noise element right now, so you will hear some discussion about that probably in the near future. And then we have an optional element, which is our 8th element. The state doesn't require this, but we also have a parks and recreation element. Is it working now? Thank you. All right, so the other part, or the other common question then, well, what is zoning? So while the general plan is like a policy, it's the council's statement of basically intent, how we want to grow. It doesn't tell you exactly how you're going to do it. So how you do it is with the zoning ordinance. So as I said, the zoning ordinance has to be consistent with the general plan. And then anything that happens in the zoning ordinance typically is land uses, where you can build a house, where you can build a store, that's regulated by the zoning ordinance. How we subdivide sizes of lots, how subdivision maps are laid out, that's part of zoning. Setbacks, how far a building has to be from the street. Building heights, how much parking is required for a different type of use, that's all in the zoning ordinance. So we've had a general plan since 1964. So there's the original 1964 general plan right there. At the time, the city was about 7,000 people, and that general plan was a 20-year plan, went to 1985, and it envisioned the population getting to about 15,000 by 1985. And I think we got to about 13,000. So it basically tracked pretty well. Here's what the original city limits were in 1964. So this red line is the city limits. So this is the historic core where we're at here. There's the Salinas River. So there's basically Creston Road. So the city kind of had annexed across the river along Creston Road and out to the Country Club area and Commerce Way Industrial. So there's your city limits in 64. So all the other areas were envisioned as growth for the city back in 1964. So here's where we're at actually today. So the blue line is our current city limit. So you can actually see that the vision of how the city was going to grow actually tracked pretty well with what actually happened. So this is the area along Union Road 46. This is the annexation where Target is down to the south. The only thing that really wasn't shown was the airport. That was a county facility at the time, so that wasn't envisioned, but we did end up annexing that to the city. So in 2003, the city did do a comprehensive update to the general plan. There was a citizen involvement survey where they asked everybody their thoughts on growth in the city. There was a series of 5 public workshops. They had an ad hoc committee, which was kind of a committee of specialists from the commission and council and the public to kind of steer this process through. It went to the Planning Commission and the City Council. And what came out of the 2003 general plan is that the city would have a build-out population of 44,000 people by 2045. And that a lot of that growth would happen in new project areas called specific plans. And those 3 major areas are what we refer to now as the Chandler Ranch Specific Plan, the Olson Ranch Specific Plan, and the Beechwood Specific Plan. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on that as we move forward. So a lot of questions about population, 44,000 build out, what does that all mean? So here's a chart that basically shows population growth from 1940. So we were a small town, about 5,000 people in 1950. We grew slowly through 1980. In 1990, there was a big uptick where we went from under 10,000 to about 18,000 in a very short period of time. So this orange line is actually the growth rate. So we were at like a 10% growth rate between the 80s and 90s. Since then, the population's continued to go up. Today we're at 31,000, but the rate has slowed down significantly. And this is the projection from 2020 to 2040, where we continue to grow at about a 2% rate to get to about 43,000 by 2040. So how fast is Paso growing today? So any guesses about how many people we added to the city last year? So the answer is -3. So this is probably a little bit of an anomaly. These numbers are calculated by the California Department of Finance, and the way they do it is they look at building permits and demolition permits, and because we did a big demolition at Oak Park, we removed a lot of units, so based on that contributed to this. So this was more of an anomaly, but it does show you that we're not growing as fast as we did in the past. So how fast we've been growing since 2010, these are the growth rates. You see, 0.3%, sometimes we were up to 1.8%. Overall, over the last 10 years or so, we've been at about a 0.7% growth rate. So this is a chart that shows basically how many houses we've been producing compared to the rest of the county since the 1990s. So Paso is the blue, or not the blue, that's green. But you can see from about 99 to about 2005, we were building more houses than anybody else in the county. At the peak, we were building 400 to 500 houses a year. And then when the recession hit, basically housing collapsed throughout the county. And since then, it's been pretty flat. So we went from building 400 or 500 houses to building 20 to 50 houses a year. So this is the housing trends. So you can see these peaks back in 2004, 2003, and then since 2008, it's been slowly going up. This last year, we hit about 250 units. A lot of those were multifamily units. So we have a couple big multifamily projects that have come online, which are real helpful. So although residential has been pretty slow for the last couple years during the recession, we've actually experienced really strong commercial growth. So I think we've all noticed the change in the downtown. We've got new hotels, new wineries, expansion of the Firestone Brewery. So those have all been very helpful for the community. Those are good income generators, job generators, and those have really helped this community through the recession. And they continue to be something we expect to continue to grow. So I talked about the general plan. So this is your general plan map right here. Here's a zoom in on it. So the purple lines are future roads that Dave will talk about. And then the colors represent land uses. So the way the general plan in '64 and today is organized is around different land uses. So the yellows are basically your residentials, your browns are your multifamilies, the pinks and reds are commercial uses, and then the blues are industrial uses, greens are park, open space, and recreation type uses. So that's kind of a common color scheme that most cities use. So in 2018, this year, the City Council did go through a goal-setting exercise, and when they did that, they identified these basic 5 areas as community priorities for the upcoming future. So housing, economic vitality, infrastructure, community character and quality life, and community partnership and engagement. So those were the goals. So as we move forward as a city, we're always looking back to those goals. So we'll kind of explain how that fits into where we're going with projects. So the general plan made a number of assumptions in 2003. So we assumed that we would be adding 5,000 houses by 2045, that we would add 4.3 million square feet of commercial and industrial space, and that would include hotels. So hotel rooms aren't dwelling units, they're just commercial square footage. So hotels are in this number, not in that number. And then that growth would happen in these specific plan areas that I mentioned previously. So, one of the questions we get a lot of times is, well, why do we need to grow? I like Paso the way it is, maybe we should just leave it alone. And there's, a strong feeling toward that, and that's understandable, but there are a number of benefits for building housing, and that's part of what we look at as we try to find the balance between all these issues. So benefits of housing include a balanced economy and demographics, where you basically can support the population and the jobs in a healthy, maintainable way. One of the things we're seeing right now is that our population, even though we're building houses, our population is staying fairly flat. It's because the number of people living in houses is actually declining. And really what that means is the families are starting to phase out. We don't have as big of families or as many families as we used to in the past. We also need jobs, or we need housing to support jobs. So if you want a healthy economic base, you need the housing to support that. Another issue is overcrowding. If you don't provide enough housing, what happens is you end up with workers pairing up in houses or tripling up, or people converting garages into housing units, and then we have overcrowding in certain units. So if you don't provide enough rental type housing, you end up with overcrowding sometimes in your single family neighborhoods. And then we need to be thinking about our next generation. Those kids that are graduating from high school, is there an opportunity for them to stay, or do they have to move out because there's not a place where they can live and work? And I think as a community, one of the things that's nice is for the opportunity to be there for the next generation to be part of this great community. So, okay, this was the other thing I want to talk about. So the third point was, in terms of why we build housing, is it's also a state requirement. So the state has what they call the regional housing needs allocation. So that's a process that they go through every 5 to 7 years, where the state actually tells every city that they have to build a certain number of units. So we have what's called a housing element. The state has to certify it. They certified our element in 2014, and basically it said that we had to build 492 housing units over a 5-year period, basically 100 units per year. And of those, 123 had to be very low income, 77 had to be low, 87 moderate income, and then 205 above moderate. And there's a whole scale on how we calculate that. But we are required by the state to plan for housing. And this element actually expires next year, so we're going to have to go through this process again. And the state's actually going to tell us that we probably have to build significantly more than that number that's shown there in this next housing cycle. So that's the third thing that the City Council has to deal with. So there's a general plan land use map. So these specific plan areas that I was mentioning, here's where they're at. So here's downtown, there's the river, 46, the airport. So the oldest specific plan is the Union 46 specific plan along Union Road. That one's more or less built out. Then we have the Borky specific plan that was approved a number of years ago. That's where River Oaks, Kermit King, and Lowe's Hardware is. Our most recent specific plan is the Uptown Town Center specific plan. That covers the whole downtown area and allows for new infill development. A lot of things you're seeing around the downtown park and the square is based on that plan. And then we have the 3 new specific plans, well now it's 4 actually. So we have the Chandler Ranch that's been split into the North Chandler Ranch and the South Chandler Ranch, so the blue and green areas. Then we have the Olson Ranch specific plan in purple, and then the Beechwood specific plan. So these are what we call, I guess, the east side specific plans, and that's where a lot of that 5,000 new units are targeted to happen. So in terms of specific plans, they are a master plan document that's adopted by the City Council that basically lays out how these areas will develop in a comprehensive way that addresses streets, housing, parks, sewer, water, all those sorts of things, and then how all those costs are shared. Now, the city doesn't actually prepare the specific plans. The projects are proposed by the private sector, but when the private property owners and their developers end up proposing something, then we process it. So the city process is that we want to have a public process consistent with the City Council goals. So we'll have community outreach and workshops, that sort of thing. Really, what the specific plan allows us to do is to shape the character of a project so it's consistent with the character and values. So we have enough parks, we have the trails, we have the character of housing, we have the streets the way we want them. So that's one of the benefits of the specific plan process, is really allow the city to make sure these projects fit with our character and quality of life here. We also will conduct an environmental review. Sometimes we call those EIRs, but that's a review of issues like traffic and water demand and whatnot, and that's open to the public to review and comment and make sure that everybody understands what the potential impacts, both positive and negative, are of a development. And it will also suggest impacts. So if a project needs more roads or a signal or something like that, that would be part of the proposal. And then the other question is, with all these projects coming, are we going to build all these houses at once? And the answer really is no, you can't. It's really driven by the market. So there's a certain absorption rate, number of houses that you can actually sell in any one year. So although we don't have a growth cap, the market will typically spread out that growth. So we have a lot of projects proposed right now, but it's going to take decades to build them out. So here's kind of a quick list of the specific plans in terms of their status. So as I mentioned, Union 46 is pretty much built out. Borky has the River Oaks 2 phase coming. That would be 270 units approximately. North Chandler would be 879 units. That needs a specific plan and environmental review. That hasn't been submitted, so we're not working on that currently. We are working on together the Olson Ranch South Chandler as one project, which is going to be about 1,200 units. So they need the specific plan and environmental review process. So we're currently working on that. We're also working on the Beechwood specific plan, which is 900 units. So Beechwood was down here, Olson's there, Chandler's there. So that'd be 911 units. That's also going through the specific plan environmental review process. And then the Uptown Town Center, that's almost 1,000 units that would be infilled throughout the downtown. Doesn't happen in any one specific location, but can happen throughout the area. So that's approved. We're seeing a lot of those projects starting to go through the process now. So now I'm just going to run you through, just kind of show you what's proposed with these projects, just so you have a little bit better understanding of where these are at. So this is the Beechwood specific plan. This is what the general plan shows. This is the land use plan that's proposed by the applicant right now. So you'll see the yellow is the single family. There's some multifamily areas, some commercial along Creston Road down here. Here's the PG&E easements. There's some open space trail features. There's a public park, and then there's an extension of Airport Road. So there you can see there's where Airport Road would be extended. So that's one of the major infrastructure pieces that they'll provide, which will connect Airport Road down to Creston Road. And then the Olson South Chandler project, that's a general plan, 1,200 units there. So this is their current land use concept. They did what's called a charrette process and came up with this. So that's, once again, single family, more dense along Lene Road, multifamily around the industrial areas, a series of parks and trails, open space along the PG&E corridor. This project ends up actually providing a number of circulation improvements. So this project will include the extension and realignment of Sherwood Road down to Lene Road. So we'll get this connection all straightened out. And then Airport Road that's coming from the north will be extended, and then will connect to this segment. So we'll have Airport Road connected to Sherwood, which will be a nice improvement. And then we'll have probably roundabout intersections at these two locations to help with that whole traffic flow. And we have the Borky specific plan, 271 units at River Oaks 2, which is right here. There's the plan. So they're proposing single family and then small lot senior. And then the benefits of this project is there's kind of a bad corner here on River Oaks and North River Road. That'll all get realigned as part of the project. And we'll get improvements on Buena Vista by Cuesta College. The Uptown Town Center specific plan. There's kind of the land use vision of that area. You can see it shows infill throughout. None of these projects are actually specific, but it just kind of shows the character of what you can do. It's up to each individual property owner to decide whether they want to do a project. But if you did, it gives you design guidelines. The idea is to create a character similar to downtown where everything's pedestrian scale, more walkable, has a nice architectural character to it. And then finally, we're also proposing what we call an annexation, where we add something to the city limits. This would be the Paso Gateway project, which is proposed as 97 residential units and resort hotels. So there's 46 West, 101, targets down here. So the residential units would be here, and then the resort hotel uses would be here. The majority of the site actually remains as open space and vineyard. So this shows basically the improvements. So we know we have traffic issues on 46 West, so we have a phased strategy to deal with it. The first phase was to realign Theater Road and add the signal here on 46, so that's been done. Second phase is then to realign the other side of South Vine Street so that it connects with the signal here, and we take that intersection out of the interchange. And then finally, phases 3 and 4 will be 2 roundabouts where the signals are here, and that should then address the long-term build-out of traffic issues there. And that will conclude land use, and then we'll switch over here to the city engineer, Dave Athey.